It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to our daily gun show. We come to you live every day at 7 p.m. Eastern. That makes it 4 Pacific for about an hour and 90 minutes each day. We do 3 gun-related topics each day, different ones throughout the week, along with all our daily things that we like to hit. We run it live on YouTube. We simulcast it over at gunchannels.com, and we're watching the live.
That would be the live feed as questions are coming in. Today, I see he's back, so I'll let him hand the baton back over to G-Webs.
Yeah, that was rude. What's going on with you, Google there? So run it live on YouTube. We simulcast it over at gunchannels.com, where we're watching the live comments from everybody that joins us live. We appreciate that. We'll take the audio when it's all over and turn it into a podcast over on iTunes. So because we don't know from the iTunes format, how many people are listening necessarily, we just know how many times the podcast gets sent out from our server. We really do appreciate everybody who gives us some feedback about the show daily with the thumbs up or the likes, gives us comments in the when the shows pop up on whatever platform you're listening on. Lets us know where you are, and it also lets the show get recommended to more viewers, more listeners. So we do appreciate that favor. There's a bunch of hosts. We got 3 of us are here today. We've got Night Strike joining us. Thanks for jumping in.
Hey, thanks for the invite.
You bet. And then we got Dano joining from Illinois.
Glad to be here.
I'm down here in Arizona. We have no idea where Bob is or Smeggy, and Z should be jumping in once he's done with his 9 to 5 or one of his 9 to 5s for the day. So today is episode 277. It's a Tuesday, so we'll be talking about Second Amendment issues, and we've been featuring a state every Tuesday. Today we'll be talking about Vermont. We also do our good idea, bad idea on Tuesdays, and today it's ball versus hollow points for concealed carry. Before we jump into all that and the things that we like to hit on a daily basis, we usually stop at the beginning here to talk about anything that might have happened overnight. Nothing.
Nothing.
All right.
Nothing but air.
Match chat last night, lock and load last night, and Andalusia Armory is happening as we speak. So if this show isn't to your liking, check out Andalusia Armory over on Gun Channels. That's a gun shop that after hours on Tuesday, they turn the webcam on and do a live chat. Very interesting show. They've been guests on our show a few times. But last night, Matt did his nerd chat, and he's been doing top 5s recently, or top 10s, and they talk about other stuff. But for the top 10 segment of the show, it was top 10 movies with time travel, and I really liked it. I guess I'm a big fan of time travel movies. Never really thought about it, but whenever he came up with that suggestion for a topic, started thinking about it, and some of the best movies out there are time travel movies, really. So of course my favorite was Terminator, but we came up with quite a few interesting ones that I hadn't thought of, other people had brought up, and then it was interesting too because as I was looking online for what movies there are on time travel so that I could help create my list, I found a couple like Looper. I don't know if anybody's seen that one, and this one called Predestination, and those two specifically I would recommend. They're not necessarily gun movies. There are some guns in, well, I guess in both of them, but they're not featured or anything. They're not action movies, but that one's Predestination. If you haven't seen that movie, it's really a treat. It's a completely different type of movie. Just the plot, when they went crazy with it. I don't know if we talked about it last night or not. I think we did at the end a little bit when we were talking. Z and I were talking about the show coming up, but I think it was an interesting show to listen to on Matt's end. And again, if you're interested in movies with great plot twists and interesting plots, I guess, then Predestination is a great movie to watch.
Was I believe I saw Looper. Wasn't that the one where one of the actors is sent back in time to eventually take himself out of the equation?
Kind of.
Yep.
They take the in the future. It's too hard to get rid of dead bodies. It's too hard to murder people. So they illegally send people back in time and murder them in their past. Now this whole thing takes place in our future, so it's weird. But yeah, the far future sends it to the future, well, to their past to be killed, and then there's this phenomenon where they'll send the executioner back to be executed by himself, and that creates like a I guess that's where they call it a loop, because the guy kills himself, so he knows he's only going to get to be so old, and then he's going to be killed. So they send him back with a bunch of money, and it's sort of like your severance pay. Here you go. We know you're going to kill yourself eventually, so go live your life, and here's a bunch of gold to do it. And it's kind of dumb, but it is definitely an interesting take on time travel movies, because normally it's just a function of the plot. Like, oh, we're going to time travel, and now we're in the past, and then a bunch of stuff happens. That Looper movie is more about the time travel being incorporated into the plot and being a plot element or whatever. So kind of neat.
Well, it also is. It's one of those movies that, as much as we think we know about time travel, it violates one of those concepts of going backwards and forwards and creating
disturbances and be yourself and all that.
It violates paradoxes.
Yes,
Yeah.
creating paradoxes that cannot be done once they're created.
And they definitely deal with that in that one specifically, because they're in the past and then the old guys come back from the future into their own past. And as the one guy is getting like tortured, the old guy version of himself is like losing appendages. So one minute he's just normal, and then he goes to grab something. He's like, wait a minute, I'm missing a finger, because his
Yeah, you remember that scene.
It's also neat because if the younger versions of themselves want to talk to the older versions of themselves, they literally just carve a message into their arm, and it scars. And then the old guy looks at his arm, and now there's a scarred, a message that's been on his arm at that moment for many years. How weird is that? So yeah, it was pretty interesting how they played with it. Yeah, I had Final Countdown in there. I think nobody else brought that one up. But then really the one that I can't even talk too much about it, but it's called Predestination. If you just like movies, if you don't, consider watching a movie a chore, then do yourself a favor, watch Predestination. It's I guess more of a crime movie. I guess the way to summarize it would be there's a time cop, a cop who travels through time to solve things, is looking for a bomber, like somebody that puts out a bomb, and they're trying to prevent that bombing. And one of the best movies I've seen in a while. It really made me think, like, okay, movies aren't just completely boring at this point. Like they're not just all following the same format. Like, this was a neat movie. Predestination from 2015, and I forget actors, so I don't know who's in it, but I'm sure somebody else will let us know.
I'm gonna go watch that one because I've been hearing good things about it.
Yeah, and I was happy to hear that Matt thought it was the best movie ever, and Heavy also really, really liked it, and most of the other people hadn't seen it yet. So I haven't heard of anyone who's watched it yet that didn't really appreciate it for being a really neat movie. So, and that's one of those things, like, you think you've seen every movie or every type of movie or whatever. When something new comes out, everybody talks about it. I don't remember anybody talking about that one, so I missed it, and it's still relatively new, so the effects are really good and everything.
I should have made my number 2 number 1.
I have a time-space geeky kind of a question. Would you consider going into hibernation, where people will retain the same age for maybe 100 or hundreds of years, and then at some point in the future wake up and they are the exact same physical age, but it's X amount of hundreds of years in the future? Would you consider that time travel?
Well, it might be, but for the sake of the movies, pretty much every list out there, and Matt qualified it with that too, that you can't count being frozen in time as time travel, because they really, for it to be a time travel movie, they want you to have like a device that allows you to go back and forth or something. At least you have to travel. So, I mean, I think you're right. Technically, it would probably be time travel in a way, but since it's not something that you can reverse or whatever, do the opposite.
Right. And the movies that have that, it's always going forward in time, never going backwards.
Well, yeah, exactly. So then it would be time travel if you're going backwards, but there are plenty of them where people either get frozen or suspended animation or, like you say, the deep space type of thing.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, they said Ethan Hawke, Sarah Snook, and Noah Taylor. I don't even know if there was 3. Ethan Hawke is pretty much the main character in it, and then that girl, I guess, Sarah. All right, so Idiocracy. See, at Idiocracy, they look for a time machine that doesn't exist, and then they go forward like that. They get frozen, but it's not really a
Suspended animation instead of being frozen.
Yeah. Otherwise, I would have put that one in. I really like that one.
Yeah, I like that one too. President Camacho.
Oh, all right. So now we definitely gone for off.
Off the deep rails, out into the ocean.
But
show's over.
It was a good show with Matt. I mean, you got to watch all the geek nerd stuff about Walking Dead and other crap that they watch. But the fast forward to the time travel part, it was pretty good.
Yep.
All right. So
ready to start the show?
yeah, I'm trying to see the anti-FA. Is that the people, the brown shirts that were in Phoenix? We talked about that a little bit yesterday, I think. They're talking about that on the YouTube side.
Yeah.
They said they sent us an email. But anyway, we looked at that, I think, a little bit yesterday after Dano was gone. Did you see that, Dano, though, about the that marchers in Phoenix, and there was a pro-Trump rally. They went to protest the pro-Trump thing, and then they had a bunch of ARs and guns, and some reporter tried to basically do an interview with them. They refused and said that you need to check our online statement or something. And we
right. When I came home, you and I were watching like a 20-minute version. I had you back up to show you that M9 bayonet the chick had.
Okay, yeah, so you saw that part of it. So they're asking about that in the YouTube side. We did talk about that a little bit, like Dan was saying, actually quite a while in the lobby last night, I think. And then we talked about it a little bit on this show with Z after, like at the end of the show. But I think overall it's a good thing. I mean, I don't think that we have to jump to any conclusion that just because they have firearms that they're going to be violent, just any way that they can get to jump to any conclusions that we have firearms that we're going to be violent. They understand the consequences for their actions. They're not mentally deranged or whatever. They're just wrong. So the fact that they have firearms is not the greatest thing, perhaps, but I'm not going to be overly concerned about it. If anything, I think it's just going to get them more comfortable and accustomed to firearms, and it makes it impossible, or at least it makes it a lot more difficult for them to suggest that firearms are not okay for us when they're willing to take them in hand for their causes. I also think that they're digging their own hole because they're out there with the guns at the high ready with masks on, and anybody who's really watching that from an indifferent third party is going to see that those people are like armed communists trying to start something. Where when you look at the Chipotle thing, unless they were posing for pictures, their rifles were slung, with the muzzles down, definitely in a carrying capacity, where these guys are using them as props and to,
Yeah, it was clearly attention-seeking devices, because clearly many of them, I shouldn't say many, some of them were not really up to speed on how to properly hold certain types of weapons or how to
they definitely
use
didn't
certain types of tools.
They didn't seem comfortable or
right,
knowledgeable about it. They seemed kind of weird.
And did you notice all the magazines and the pictures were in the rifles?
What?
Yeah, all the pictures that they showed that I've seen online of those yahoos, they all had magazines or drums in their rifles. Yeah. And here's the thing: they were all the so-called assault weapons the left wants to ban.
Right, but that's part of the attention-seeking device. Is you use a prop, and that's exactly how they use them, as props to get the attention of, oh my, look. And it certainly had that effect, maybe not to the effect that they wanted, but it definitely got a limited effect in that way.
Yeah, and we don't associate ourselves with criminals. So just because they had a firearm doesn't mean they're gun owners. I mean, they technically are gun owners, but you know what I'm saying? They're not. We don't have to associate ourselves with them. I mean, people do all kinds of crazy art that I don't like. It doesn't mean I want to see art taken down.
Yep.
But I don't mind that they have magazines. Who cares? Magazines are totally legal in Arizona. Have all the magazines you want in there. Put bigger magazines in if you want.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I just figured I'd point that out because they had everything that they always go after.
No, I think that's a great point too, and that's another facet of it that I think is fascinating because literally, I mean, almost minutes ago, it would have been thousands of minutes ago, but you know what I mean, like days ago, months ago, weeks ago, these people would have all been up in the air, you know, would have been totally for the banning of everything that they were carrying, and you know they would have been like marching in the streets to get rid of private ownership of those things. So, for one, it makes it impossible for them to suggest that they're being consistent. And then it sold some guns. Somebody made some money on those, so it's capitalism.
Yay, capitalism.
Yep.
But I saw that.
Boone is saying that predestination was predictable. I thought I knew what was happening, but they kept twisting it on me. Maybe I thought it was really good. I didn't like it. That's the first indifferent review I've heard of it. All right, well, so we'll dig into the show, I guess. Second Amendment issue today is how do the states rank? So Dana was suggesting we use the NRA. They do a yearly thing. I think Guns and Ammo or somebody does a yearly, like as far as gun rights, I suppose, or gun laws type of oriented list, like pro-gun states or something.
Yeah, I know they have a list. I don't necessarily know if it's the list that we would necessarily want to use, other than it simply exists. And so, unfortunately, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm assuming we mean as far as guns. I mean, we don't care about how they rank with population or their emission. Something. We care about guns. So, do we rank it on how many gun-related manufacturers are there, like how much history they have to them? Because then the East Coast states are going to weigh heavily, I would think. Not completely, but you know, big way. Where if we go to laws, then they're probably going to lose their advantage over there. So I'm saying the Brady organizations list. Just put that opposite. If the Brady.
I'm actually trying to find over on their website the map where it actually has, you know, number 1 through number 50, and I can't quite find it. But I know it's somewhere here.
On which site?
The NRA.
Oh, okay. Sean was saying on the YouTube side, the Brady campaign, they always make a list too, and you can basically flip it. If they like your state, then you're in trouble, and if they hate your state, you're probably doing the right thing. You're probably on the right track.
Where is it here?
Pants is saying he found Predestination on YouTube, so that's a good one if you don't have it on like Netflix or Amazon or something. I don't necessarily want to do a list where we shame a bunch of states, you know, and just remind everybody how much they may or may not have good laws or whatever. So is there a different way to rank states that?
Well, yeah, I was going to try to do like, you know, the top 5 or 10, so at least we could highlight, you know, states that seem to be in the right direction, and that's why I'm trying to find that list.
I'm thinking a way to rank them could be potentially time-wise, like when they, how much they contributed to the gun community as far as things go. Like it might be interesting seeing like a timeline with like Connecticut or New York. You know, they had crazy laws always, but then some of the biggest manufacturers, Colt and whatnot, you know, building lots of stuff. Thompson's come from New York, I think. So you know, they would have a time when they were active, and then that would end when their laws got so restrictive, or maybe their population got so large that they had to leave to go to a bigger, you know, places to get bigger facilities.
Yeah, in fact, I did find on gunsandammo.com a top 50, and we'll just go through the 5 according to Guns and Ammo.
We'll throw a link in here and you can screen share it.
Oh, you got it?
No, saying throw a link in here and I can screen share it.
Oh, just a moment. Standing by. Da-da-da-da. Put that over there. Put that over on gun channels. Okay. All right. The best state for gun owners, number 5, Kentucky. Kentucky has always done well in gun rights rankings with statutes and a cultural consistent with friendly gun owners. Number 4, Utah. Effort to establish permitless carry. Utah failed earlier this year when the Senate bill died on the calendar in the House. Still, Utah's gun laws are very strong by national standards. Number 3, Alaska. What can you say about a state that basically has it all? Alaska allows you to carry with or without a permit, openly or concealed. Number 2, the state that we're going to cover later today, Vermont. If there were a category for the most overrated state for gun owners, it would be go to Vermont. Don't get us wrong, Guns and Ammos loves Green Mountain State for its gun laws, or lack thereof, but the culture of the state is not as pro-gun as you may think. And then it goes into some details. Basically due to being increasingly populated by New Yorkers, and many of those of the Northeast is bringing Vermont down. And hanging in, still at number 1, Arizona. Yay! Do you like my artificial sound effects? Still, the reigning champion, Arizona combines strong gun laws, an unmatched shooting culture, and strong industry presence. That is the top 5 according to gunsandammo.com. And this was 2015, so subject to change.
Well, so 2015, has anything changed in the last couple of years? Would you change that law? I would say Utah. Yeah, they're doing fine. Kentucky. Let's see, what do they have beyond Kentucky there? They have Wyoming at number 6. I think I would give it to Wyoming. They have constitutional carry. Does Kentucky have constitutional carry?
They didn't before, but I think they mentioned in number 5. I'll scroll down to it. Something about. Let me get down to it. 7, Kentucky.
Oh, it looks like they used some sort of a ranking system, so they gave them a score of 47. So they actually did some kind of a scoring system to do this, to quantify the various things, I guess.
Yeah, Kentucky has the chief law enforcement officers shall sign law in place. So although you still have to get the signature, it's a shall issue versus a may issue. And that's what we have in Illinois. We do have a Clio sign off, but it's a shall sign.
Right. So that alone doesn't give it any extra status. That's just sort of the way that's the default norm at this point.
Right, but there are states with may issue where they do sign off, and there are states with may issue where they don't.
Yeah, but there's just a few where they don't, and that's not unique enough that I would necessarily.
Right. I mean, but from a black letter law perspective, I'm much more. If I lived in one of those states, I would feel much more secure knowing that it was written in the law, the shall issue part, rather than assume, well, they've always signed it before, they'll always sign it in the future. Because things change.
Going the other way, it's interesting that they do the other side. They got Maryland at 44, Connecticut at 45, then California more restrictive at 46, then Hawaii at 47, Massachusetts, though, they're saying more than Hawaii and New Jersey, and then the worst is New York, with the ultimate worst being D.C. So D.C., yeah, it's pretty horrible. You can't even, I mean, although they have interesting laws, there's no way to actually facilitate them. There's no gun shops kind of thing. No one issues the permits or whatever. It's super expensive and difficult to get one. So even though they have them, it's all but impossible.
And
so
if I remember correctly,
New Jersey, all about whole.
If I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but before the Otis McDonald case actually went to the Supreme Court, that D.C. residents were not allowed to own firearms. Is that correct? I mean, that was, I think, 2012 that went to the Supreme Court.
That what went to the Supreme Court?
Otis McDonald versus Lisa Madigan, state of Illinois. Over the right to purchase a firearm.
I don't remember that one.
because there were, like in DC, rules against owning firearms in your home.
And then Heller didn't have anything to do with that?
I don't remember the specifics of Heller. I believe, I always put it out, please correct me if I'm wrong, was more of a carry issue. But this was all happening, and as a result of Heller is how Illinois, where I live, through the court system, we were finally allowed to get back the rights that we should have always had.
Yeah, well, just looking through this list, it's interesting the effort they put into it, but it's unfortunately dated at this point. I know that their rankings are going to change when you include constitutional carry in this. I don't know if they even had that as a factor in it.
Right.
And obviously the Gunmageddon would be an issue on the other end, and some of the stuff in Hawaii that's happened more recently than 2015. And then that last Ninth Court deal, all that, imagine, shuffle this up quite a bit. So do they explain at the beginning of this what they used for the criteria, what number amounts they gave to the different criteria that they came up with these scores?
I did not go through that in detail. I don't know if they did or not.
It doesn't, they just allude to it. They don't give you the actual scores or the ranking.
I mean, yeah, I assumed that it was just an editorial discretion as to what was number 1 and what was number 51.
Well, I don't think so, because if you read some of the descriptions, they'll tell you what it scored. For example, that Kentucky one says it scored a 47. So I'm going to scroll back down to Kentucky. It says with a strong 47 points, its score remains unchanged for 2015. So they're using some sort of a scoring system with points to literally give these things their rank. So like I said, that'd be interesting to see what they're actually using, because looks like they haven't done it since 2014. Did it become not an issue for gun and ammo, or what?
I don't know.
Yeah, come on, guns and ammo.
Because I would think that'd be like an annual thing that they would revisit.
Yeah, it looks like they had done it at least 2014 and then 2015. All right, well, we don't have the guns and ammo shame. That was a little bit about that subject. I don't know, again, how deep we want to dig into it. I think, though, that it might be interesting as an exercise for somebody to do, to put some number values on the various characteristics that we would use to, like when you do your state of the state, about the various states, you know, what their open carry policy is, what their constitutional carry policy is, what their ownership restrictions might be. Give those things either positive or negative numbers, and then apply them to all the different states. We would get a number for each one, and then that would give them a ranking.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I'm going to go ahead and give you another quick link here to another website that I think is very interesting to look at. Bend over and throw that in there. I'll go ahead and put it over on Gun Channels as well, for anybody that might want to check it out.
Yeah, like Tony's saying that they put Nevada over Tennessee because they host the SHOT Show. Well, Nevada also has universal background checks, technically, although it's not enforceable. That's a factor, and that's more recent than 2015. So,
right now, this other article, which is from Desert News, also October 2015, has, as an example, Vermont tied at number 9 with Kansas. So it's a good example, although they have numerical ratings, of how two different what appear to be freedom, pro firearm websites can give them various different rankings. And let's see, South Dakota was number 8. Alaska was number 5. Again, I'm just saying this in contrast to the guns and ammo one we just looked at. Missouri was number 5.
Hold on, let me screen share again. So we're looking at the 10 states with least restrictive gun laws.
Yeah. So it's,
They take this picture of SHOT Show, and then they show, looks like I saw here, they're going to count their the law center to prevent gun violence grade, then their gun law rank, whatever that is, and then their gun death rank.
Now, what really is ironic is number 2, Arizona tied with Mississippi, and Mississippi wasn't even on the top 5 list at all over guns and ammo. And number 1 was Louisiana, which wasn't on the top 5. And these were both done in the same year. So it can get very confusing when trying to figure this stuff out.
I wonder what a gun death rank is.
Not sure.
No idea.
In 2014, Arizona strengthened gun laws by requiring health records to be sent to the FBI. Okay. Mississippi tied. Mississippi gun laws do not require background checks for the transfer of a firearm between private parties. Of course not. No state does. Well, I guess some states may. Regulate assault weapons. Require gun owners to have a license. Yeah, I don't know where they came up with this. And then they're going to say Louisiana has the least? What? Yeah, I wonder.
I'm surprised South Carolina's not on this list.
The least restrictive gun laws?
Yeah, because we don't require a license to own a firearm, whereas some of these examples have them.
That require that. There's like barely any states that require that. I don't even know how that could be a criteria. That when the majority of the states don't even come anywhere close to requiring that, how could that even be a criteria?
Yeah. Well, it's in there. You just mentioned it just a little while ago. So it's ridiculous. I think that they're
okay. The gun death rank indicates the number of gun-related deaths in the state has in comparison with the other 50 states.
Right.
So just a pointless number, because obviously population isn't included there, anything else. So number of cities, nothing. So that's just a number for the shock value, potentially. It's a number that they can use to either say good or bad things about, just because it's a number.
So between those two websites, I had to step away from the mic for a minute, but which do you think tends to be a little bit more accurate? Neither one of them is perfect.
Oh no, that one from the Center for the Idiotness is insane. There's nothing accurate about that at all. It's just total randomness, and they're probably just trying to scare people. I'm sure they put, what did they put for number 1? Louisiana. That's just for the shock value. I have no idea why they would put. There's nothing. Who would have ever included Louisiana as a gun-free state?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not familiar with Louisiana, but I don't hear it coming up very often.
No,
in conversations.
I mean, it's not gun unfriendly, but it's certainly not the most gun-friendly state or anything. You got to think of a gun-friendly state being one that you can go shoot at. I don't know of any places in Louisiana where you just have giant areas where you can go shoot.
On that other list, Louisiana was 17, from guns and ammo, but South Carolina was 14. So just pointing that out.
Because things were so clearly different from one to another, it kind of raised my suspicion.
Arizona's number 1 on the guns and ammo list. So I don't know. I would go with the guns and ammo as opposed to the whole, was it Desiree News or Desert? No, it's Desiree. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out because I happened to see it before we kind of left the topic completely.
Fair enough. So we'll leave that one for now. If somebody has an idea of how to do a more accurate ranking of the states, I'll have to get with Smeggy. Maybe that's something we can do on an Every Second Matters or something at some point. because I think you probably could come up. It would probably be a little work to come up with a number system for the various criteria so that it kept in a good balance. You probably have to weight some things. Constitutional carry might weigh more than just permit carry or something, and then that way you can get some of these states to compete head to head. But anyway, that might be an interesting project. We'll move to the good idea, bad idea then. So every week we try to take a look at a topic and just kind of debate it between ourselves and the audience. But before we do, between the first and second segment of the show every day, we like to feature one of the members over at Gun Channels. And today we're featuring Garand Man. Been a long time participant in the chats, and we've got a link to his channel there. I would say one of the reasons we built Gun Channels for people who want to participate in the various ways, and he's always consistently chatting and showing up in the chat, so it's always nice to see him there, and I'm sure lots of people have had conversations with him and whatnot. Does he jump into the chat very often? I think I have seen him in chats, but not on a regular basis.
Right. He's regularly in the text chats. I see him every week down there. And then every once in a while, I will see him in one of the panel chats, but not particularly often. But definitely is a welcome addition to Gun Channels.
Oops. Right. With that, we'll go into the good idea, bad idea then, and I think today ball in.
It's coming! It's coming! Oh my God, it's coming! That's right. It's
take
coming.
cover. Take cover.
Tactical. Did my thing. That's all right. It's time for the tactical pop quiz of the day. So those of you over on YouTube, get your cursor down into the lower box, limber up your fingers. Those of you on Gun Channels, you do the same. I will read the question twice, but before I get to that point, G-Webs, have you seen the answer to the question? And if you could keep an eye on the YouTube side while I keep an eye on the Gun Channel side.
Yep.
Okay. I will read the question twice. It is a two-part answer. Both parts must be in the same line. So the question is as follows. What city and state is Moss, Pawn, and Gun located? What city and state is Moss, Pawn, and Gun located?
Sam Colt is not the answer. 42 is the answer, but not the answer we're looking for.
Come on, Gun Channels.
It should be pretty simple for everybody. Atlanta, Georgia is not correct.
Gun Channels is just sitting there doing nothing.
Reno, Nevada is not correct. Sevierville, Tennessee is not correct. Kalashnikov.
Yeah, nobody's even guessed the right state.
Yeah, they have.
Oh.
Georgia, Moss? No. Smyrna, Georgia? No. Smyrna is on the other side of Atlanta where Glock is.
Oh, we got an answer.
Jonesboro, Georgia?
Do we have the correct answer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, okay, good. So who's our winner?
Christelle.
Oh. All right, you must be over on the YouTube side for today. Well, congratulations, Chris. You are our tactical pop quiz winner for today.
You are You are in the lobby chat because that's where you've been dropping links. I suspect since you didn't see Chris's answer, but he's on the Gun Channel.
He's on the Gun Channel side.
I think you're just in the lobby.
What's I looking at?
You're looking at the lobby.
Well, how do you know that?
Because you've been dropping links in the lobby the whole afternoon. I've been redropping them into the Gun Channels or into the daily.
Well, why didn't you tell me I was looking at the wrong screen before we got here?
I didn't know you were doing that intentionally, so now I figured it out. So anyway, we got it all figured out. Yeah. It's Chris.
No, I just, that was a screw up on my part, so I apologize, but congratulations, Chris. You are the Tactical Pop Quiz hot shot for today.
Oh, shit. Uh-oh. So now that Dano's in there, you can call it. Technically, Raphael wrote it in there, Jonesboro, Georgia, And then a little bit later, I noticed the one that Chris had put in there with the Jonesboro, or whatever it is, Jonesboro. So if you want to accept a misspelling from Raf.
I will accept phonetic spelling.
Okay, so then, sorry, Chris, it is Raphael, that one.
All right. Well, sorry about that little misstep. Again, part 2 misstep on Dano's part. So congratulations, Raphael. Head on over to dailygunshow.com/pop-quiz. Fill out the form, and congratulations. It is Jonesboro, Georgia. For any of you that wanted a reminder.
I think at that point, let's take a break and just do the gun shop of the day. So we'll make it Moss Pond since we don't have anything else in here today anyway. And I can screen capture. So when Haas and I drove around in 2012, one of the reasons we've
been out traveling the country on our road trip, and this is one.
When we were out driving around in 2012, we wanted to stop by and talk to Eric, and he was at the shop that day. So we went in and checked it out. It was kind of neat seeing the place after seeing a lot of it, from their websites or from their videos and stuff. But much larger place than you might think from seeing the videos. I mean, I'm walking around with the camera showing it all around, and you've seen, I'm sure, some of these angles from videos when they would set them up at the various spots in the store, but being able to see them all together, there's quite a bit of shop there, and the number of guns is incredible. It's really cool. You can see just everything's as packed as it could possibly be. They have a massive variety. That's when I bought that Law tube off the ceiling. Barry cut that down for me. And about that thing, snatched it right up. They sold that to me for like $100, and then BS'd with them for a while there. And you can just see the amount of reloading components and ammo, and of course all those glass shelves are guns and racks of rifles and stuff in the middle. Really an interesting gun shop, considering it's across the street from another one that's not anywhere near as impressive. It's a lot of guns, but literally across the street from another shop that's probably 2/3 as big, almost as big. They must sell a lot of guns in Atlanta.
Well, it also makes you wonder, it's not like, 2 different hamburger stands across the street from one another where the hamburgers place tastes completely different from one another. Is brand X at the one, is brand X at the other. So it makes you wonder how they could both stay in business being that close to each other.
Well, and we saw Barry in there, right? I'm sure that was the reason.
Yep.
It's people. The one across the street was like kind of it's a pawn shop, and then they had like a half of guns. This was about the same, but it was mom and pop type of pawn shop, where I'm sure that they just paid more attention to the people, and that's why they were so successful. The one across the street was successful as well, but more of like you're saying, like the McDonald's in and out, like if you have a problem, take a number kind of place. So I suspect
and
people.
And for those that might be listening that might not have ever heard, well, who's Barry? Barry had almost an infectious kind of personality to him in regards to, I never met the man, but in regards to like his personality on video, it really came across as a very, what it was like in real life, I have no idea. He's
just like in the videos, he's very real person, right? A real honest and what do you call that? Real.
Unassuming.
On his mind and is there to help you and offer information. He was just nice guy, and just makes you feel at ease and comfortable. And well, I guess it's a little weird because even at that point we had seen him on video quite a bit. So I don't know, when you meet people that you've seen do a lot of YouTube stuff, you kind of have a weird advantage over them where you've spent much time with them, and they don't know you from Adam, but you know what I mean? You've spent time with them, so you know a lot about them and their personality and that. And although you're meeting them for the first time, you have a pretty good grasp of them. So putting that in, that perception that we all have, and then meeting people, some people are not as comfortable and is in the same. Like Yankee is exactly how he is on video in real life. Trying to think of somebody who's not going to get offended if I say that they're not the same. other people are not the same as when you see them in real life. They're just different. They talk at a different pace. You know, you can tell that they're maybe unsure of how they, I don't know, they're just different people. And Barry was not. He was exactly the same person when you see him on video. And,
and I know when I first came across, you know, their channel, part of the reason that I enjoyed watching them and I stayed with them and subscribed to them was he not only was very knowledgeable, along with, what's the name of the other guy?
Eric.
Eric is obviously a very knowledgeable guy, very skilled guy, but doesn't necessarily have that color commentary sort of thing that Barry had going. And I think that's what kind of made them a good mix, and that's why I was very sad to hear when Barry passed on, and that part of the I'm going to call it the show, for lack of a better word, was lost to the world, because I really enjoyed that part. I mean, every once in a while he'd actually come on with like a lab coat, like he was a doctor, and take on different personas as part of the video. And I don't know, I miss having, you know, Barry in our YouTube community.
So Diecaster is asking how much I want for that law tube. I ain't selling it. That's back when I was a kid. You used to be able to buy law tubes all the time for nothing, like $5, $10, and I never bought them because I figured it was a waste of space. But later on, I got one somewhere and I paid a lot for it, and it was shitty. It doesn't have any of the caps or lenses or anything. The rubber's all gross, and been bugging me because I remember seeing so many pristine ones when I was a kid at gun shows. So whenever I saw that one on the hanging there, and I forget what they had on it, but it was like $100. That thing was complete. I think I might be missing the lens out of the thing, but I might not. I haven't opened it in a while. Anyway, it was pretty complete. For $500.
How's the condition of the rubber boots for launching?
Pretty sure the rubber. I haven't looked at it in a while. The rubber.
Because
trigger.
that's the part that, especially if it's a training law, it's going to get actuated the most.
Yeah, and that
other
almost
than flipping the sights up and down.
Broken sometimes because it really didn't matter. So. Yeah, I expected all that to be rotted out and gross, but it wasn't. If I remember right, it was pretty good. So he's saying, would I sell it for $500? Yes, I'd probably sell it for $500. But I really like it. It's cool, and I haven't done what I want to do with it, which is shoot a bunch of bottle rockets out of it. So at some point, I'll shoot bottle rockets out of it and feel less like I need to own it. But until then, I feel like I need to own it.
So does it still have that front elevators or ladder style front sight?
That's what I'm saying. That little piece of plastic might be busted out. I'm not sure. Those usually bust out pretty quick. Yeah. And mine is a training one. It's the yellow designated training one. So those end up being around more. Although, like I say, you used to be able to find just the dead ones all the time. They were really cool. Anyway, they're not useful for anything except for playing with. But if you want to roll up some targets, some big ass cardboard or paper, not cardboard, but paper targets, then that's the coolest way to drag your paper targets to the range. Chad was there, yeah. That was in 12. I guess I don't know who all we had on video, but they were all working at the shop that day. And then we all went out shooting, so we ended up meeting everybody. Family and stuff. We went out to eat and stuff. They're all genuine people, good people. So $500 as well charge you to rearm it? No, I don't even want an armed one, so no thanks. Plus I don't have $500. If I had $500, I'd be working on my van. I wouldn't be on
this. As well as you know, that's beyond NFA.
I don't know. The projectile itself, you could probably get something as a destructive device, right? And then the tube, I don't count the tubes as destructive devices, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know if there is such a thing as a reactivated law. I know you can shoot bottle rockets out of them. That's all I planned on doing. Maybe duct tape a Roman candle in there. That might be fun.
Now that would be cool. Launch balls of fire.
Speaking of balls of fire, it looks like Z jumped in. Thanks for joining.
Goodness gracious.
Now, do we have Dan for a bit still? Are you still around for a little bit, Dan, before you have to leave?
Yeah, I got a few more.
Then I'm going to say, why don't we jump into the Vermont, and then we can do good idea, bad idea after. Since you
sounds good.
Good to go. So we try to talk about a state each month, state each week. Excuse me. And today it's Vermont. So Dano, I think, has a little bit something prepared here.
Yep, I have my Vermont state of the state prepared. and I'll kind of go through this, and it just simply brings up as to where are they as of today. And they're in Vermont. They have no state permit required to purchase. There is no firearm registration. There is no ban on assault weapons, or definition of assault weapons. There's no magazine limits of any type. There's no licensing of owners like we have here in Illinois. There's no carry permits, as they have permitless carry for any U.S. citizen for pistol and long guns. There is no restriction on NFA items, and there's no background checks for private sales. And that is the state of the state for Vermont. And they are continually highly recommended in regards to rankings in the states that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier in the show. But they did mention one of the key sentences is things are in Vermont, they're noticing the change because the number of people moving to Vermont from New York and New Jersey, state politics.
That's what I was going to say. Looking at a snapshot isn't necessarily the whole picture because, things are changing all the time.
Right.
But I mean, Bob Newhart had a very good dental practice in Manhattan, and he moved up there to run a bed and breakfast.
He was anti-gun. He would have voted anti-gun bills.
Oh, you know it. I mean, honestly, I don't know that Bob Newhart is or was, but I guess I would not be surprised.
Well, the character for sure seemed like an anti-gunner.
If I'm going to make a statement here, or try to draw an analogy here, is that if Vermont is the Arizona of the Northeast, then is there an Arizona of the Northwest? Staying in the lower 48? Just throwing it out there.
If Vermont is the Arizona of the Northeast, is there an Arizona of the Northwest? Well, it ain't it ain't Washington, and it ain't Oregon. So it's either got to be Idaho, or do you count Utah?
I guess Western Utah, Wyoming.
See, because Utah I would think would be Southwest because it's deserty, but Wyoming is central. I'm not going to count Wyoming as Northwest.
You know that Arizona is technically the Vermont of the Southeast, right? Since it was one of the original 13 colonies. I mean, you do know that, right?
Hold on.
Yeah, I did kind of.
They had pro-gun laws long before Arizona did.
Wait, who?
Vermont.
What did you say?
He's Vermont denying.
No, I'm not. I'm saying Vermont was first. Therefore, Arizona is the Vermont of the Southeast, is what I'm saying.
Southwest. That's where you screwed.
Oh, that's what I meant. Yes, Southwest. My bad. That's exactly what I meant.
No, I agree with you, Z.
But who's the winner in the Northwest? Man, that's a tough one. Like, because I want to say like Idaho or Montana, and then like you said with Utah, that's not so much Northwest anymore though.
And I mean, just to throw a few other aspects of the question out there is, I think the Southeast would clearly have to be Kentucky.
I don't consider Kentucky to be in the Southeast, by the way. Florida, Kentucky is not really in the Southeast at all.
It's part of the South.
It's part of the South, but like when you're saying Southeast, you're talking Georgia, Florida.
Right. I don't mean coastal.
I know, but also Mississippi and all that. So like Tennessee, that's the Southeast, right? And there you go. Artisan Tony, who lives in Tennessee, has got my back. Thank you.
Is Kentucky even south? I don't think it's south, is it?
I think it's south of the Mason-Dixon line, so therefore it can be considered south.
Then that only puts one state north of it. That puts Ohio and Indiana. I mean, then there's only one state in the whole north. That seems ridiculous.
No, what are you talking about? How many states are above the Mason-Dixon line? A lot.
No, but I'm saying if you're gonna, where's this Mason-Dixon line? I guess I never pay attention to that. What is that? That's where the north and south.
It's a thing called the Civil War. War between the states. That sort of thing. War of Northern Aggression.
Two cartographers. One last name was Mason. One last name was Dixon. When they were doing the topography of map, like back in the freaking day, basically everything below the Mason-Dixon line when they did the topography thing for cartography, everything below it was considered the South. Everything above it was considered the North. So like if you want to think about it, it's like Virginia, Kentucky, West Virginia, everything, like below them. And then so therefore anything above that.
I would have put it right here between Virginia and North Carolina, and then between Kentucky and Tennessee. Boom, straight line, done. And that's about half and half. Then you get
you're wrong, but that's okay.
Well, that's right. You're saying it's up on this Ohio River?
Do me a favor, zoom in, please.
I'm going to end this controversy right now because I'm going to share something with all of you that very clearly delineates, if you look at my picture, exactly where the line is. And it's on between Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and then continues on through, Arkansas, Missouri, the northern part. Very clear where the Mason-Dixon line begins and ends.
Ohio River. You could have just said the Ohio River then.
Well, that would have been shorter.
So anyhow, I think that's messed up. I think Kentucky should go to the north, and the South should quit trying to whore Kentucky all the time.
I think that everybody in Kentucky will argue with you that they do not want to be in the north.
Yes.
Well,
exactly.
The Midwest. I'm calling them the Midwest, I guess. They can.
Whatever. They are. The Kentuckians are proud of their Southern heritage.
Yes. And being that I live in the Midwest, I can tell you Kentucky is very different than all the other states that surround Illinois.
Sir, yes, sir.
All right. Well,
so I'm going to say Kentucky, maybe Tennessee number 2, or maybe Tennessee number 1, Kentucky number 2, but right there is going to be the Vermont of the Southeast. Now I'm going to throw of the Midwest. I'm going to say Indiana.
Indiana
is the closest thing by far to
what?
To the Vermont of the Midwest.
Daniel's trying to create a Vermont of each of the regions, except he also a new region called the Northwest, because evidently, even though the South can have as much as they fucking want, the West has to divide up into 2 pieces.
Well, as you see it listed on here, it's just the West.
Yeah. So I don't want to have to be associated with Washington, Oregon,
and people in Texas will technically argue with you that they may not be in the South, that they are in the West. I've definitely heard that one flip flop.
We'll give them the South. They can have the South can have Texas.
Don't be doing that, man.
I'm just saying, there's already a line there. We don't want to just dispute these lines down, Drew.
I ain't about to make Texas mad on this show or any other show. I'm not saying we're Texas apologizers or anything like that. I'm just saying.
People may not like where the lines are, but I will acknowledge they are where they are.
Well, this is somebody's interpretation of it. I don't know that this is necessarily fact, this picture with words on it that you got right there.
It's on the internet, so it seems kind of factual. I don't know. I never really, I guess that's the difference between growing up in different places. That I knew the Civil War happened, but I never put so much effort into it that I cared about where the Mason-Dixon line was. Now that I'm 40-something years old. I never lived near it, I guess. I never came up.
If you never got exposed to it, yeah, that's the thing. When I lived in North Carolina for a short amount of time, it was brought to my attention more than once. Let's just put it like that.
But its impact was so widely felt. 1 block from my house, there is a war memorial with the local soldiers that died from the town I currently live in that fought in the Civil War.
Well, that's true. There was always that because pretty much everybody was involved in it at some point or another. So that means every town, had people that went. All right. I don't know how that all started. Where did that even all start from? Moss Gun Shop? It's the last thing I remember right on the schedule.
No, the Vermont of the Northwest is technically where that started.
So that was our touch on Vermont. We touched Vermont a little bit here, and we'll continue to do that each week. It sounds like next week we're going to have our friend Night Strike back on to talk about South Carolina. We kind of move the schedule around to fit with his. And then the week after that, we'll be talking about Florida, then Minnesota, then Michigan, and Oregon after that. So if you're in any of those states or you're familiar with them and you'd like to join us, feel free. If it's not something you can join us live, you can always email us at dailygunshow@gmail.com and send us whatever information or links or something. The whole point of this show is to get people out there doing their thing and sharing what they're doing, getting people involved, encouraging them to create some content or to participate in this kind of thing that's collaborative. All right, so with that, we'll dig into good idea, bad idea. If Dano's got some time, he can stick around and fight it out with us.
Yeah,
I think that's a good idea.
Since I have to drop out fairly soon here, if I can ask just for the first go around, and then you guys can fight about it after I'm gone. But I'm going to say ball ammo for the range and for going out where there's dangerous creatures. Good idea. Carry ammo for when you're carrying, like hollow points. Good idea.
What is the topic, please?
Ball ammo for carry versus hollow points.
No, it's good idea, bad idea, and it's ball ammo for carry. That's the topic.
Oh,
is that a good
idea?
And then just to clarify, we're talking ball ammo versus hollow points, but it's ball ammo for carry. Is that a good idea, or bad idea?
Oh, gotcha. Let me retract my statement.
Variables, right?
Bad idea. Really, really bad idea.
Oh, interesting. No matter the caliber, if you're carrying.
That's what I was going to stipulate right there, G. That's where I was going to dig.
Okay. In certain calibers there is an exception, but I didn't think we wanted to go that route. But yes, I will succumb to that in certain calibers, like 380 and down.
And 32, 25, all that.
Yep, that's all about ball.
Now, is that beach ball sized lady nuts or regular ball ammo?
I'm assuming we're just going to go with a regular ball.
Okay. So in that case, also, what time of year are we? Okay, I guess I'm tailor making a scenario to choose ball ammo. As a norm, I would say bad idea, but if you live in a northern climate where it's snowy and there's large overcoats and stuff like that, I think you may be better served by ball ammo. Artisan Tony out in the chat makes a very valid point in that ball ammo feeds well. I'm not saying that all other specific calibers or bullets or make and model of gun feed hollow points bad. It's just that ball ammo does feed probably the best of them all.
Which is why you should always, make sure that your carry ammo feeds properly regardless of what it is before you carry it.
Clearly. So I will say, man, I guess begrudgingly I will say that ball ammo for carry is bad. Bad idea. Begrudgingly though. Like I think that there are certain circumstances where it's going to be a good idea. Of course.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say that too, just because we have to choose something. So hollow point is better for its effectiveness, and then for over penetration, I guess it's hard to deny that hollow point isn't going to lose all its energy like it's supposed to. Where there are circumstances where ball is better though, so it's tough. It's not an easy one to answer, but without too many qualifiers, I guess just to make it easy, we'll say hollow point's better, I guess. So
well, if we're talking good idea, bad idea, technically you're saying bad idea is what you're saying. I mean,
correct. Yeah, we're all agreeing.
If we're following what we're talking about.
But then again, keeping in mind that there's always those.
Oh yeah, 32s, 25s, 380s. Let alone how about 45 potentially in the winter or something like that. I don't know. I'm from the Great White North originally, and let's just say you got several layers on you. So if you had to defend yourself in the dead of winter up there, man, I don't know how many layers of clothes you're going through. You're going through like potentially insulated underwear, right? You're going through a t-shirt, you're going through an overshirt, you're potentially going through a sweater, and then maybe a jacket, potentially an overcoat or oversuit over that, even like a snowmobile suit, technically. So I mean,
you know, and that's one of the reasons why, like for the FBI standards, why they have a maximum standard of 18 inches. It's not because people are 18 inches thick, and that's why they test with various types of material between that, and the gel. But to stick with
they
something,
do a very limited amount of layering tests. Actually, I would say TN Outdoor 9 probably does a better job with more variation of layer testing almost than the FBI does, in my opinion.
Well, you don't want to. You want to just have consistency. So the like you said, 18 inches.
And I understand that.
18 inches. It's just so that you get consistent performance measures. So they want to have the same thing on the front. You can't have nothing because there is an issue with hollow points filling. So depending on the shape and the cut and the dimensions or whatever, every hollow point shape and whatever is gonna fill differently. So they just try to put a uniform, consistent something in front. And what is it? 3 pieces of denim or something?
Yep, but I thought it was 3.
If you're living in town in Alaska, whatever law enforcement carries for in-town use is probably would be a good choice for you to consider.
Now we do have some comments out in the chat that the ball 9mm that they have shot and tested doesn't seem to over penetrate so much, gets them about 13 inches. Now, I don't know necessarily particularly if that's brand to brand. I don't know if it was due to the barrel length or something like that, but I think I think that it's a valid observation. It's a factor, right? Well,
I'd like to know, and where was this test done? How was it controlled, etc.?
What do you mean? Like, were the lights on? Was he wearing a windbreaker? What are we talking here?
Well, I fired 9mm, 115 grain, and I got 12 inches. Well, no, I've told you nothing about my testing protocol. I mean, it has to be the same from one test to another test to another test to draw conclusions. Just because I got ballistic gel doesn't mean
we're talking Tony, so obviously he's aware of that kind of stuff. He
just gave us a couple of answers.
But the thing is that 9mm, what is he saying? That he get 13 inches, I'm assuming, into gel?
Yep.
Okay, so that's just gel.
At about 10 feet.
That's great. So that's just a performance measure, just like driving a car on a what do you call it, like a
drag flat.
Yeah, on a surface that's flat and straight, and you can time it. That doesn't mean what you're going to get like mileage in town. I mean, there's always going to be, your mileage may vary, and that means bones and buttons and other things belts that you might hit on a bad guy. So what a ball ammo can do versus what hollow point can do is different. I mean, the over penetration isn't simply going through the person. It has to do with if that stuff is going to be impeded, if all its energy is going to be lost in the first thing it hits, if that's going to be a belt buckle, or if that's going to be, the sternum, or if that's going to be the backbone. You don't know. So ball ammo has a different characteristic to it, that it's going to keep throwing its energy forward. It doesn't lose its
whether
energy.
It's your sternum or a belt buckle is what you're saying, right?
Right.
Okay, I was just making sure because I thought I lost you for a second, and then I came back around to understanding.
In other words, they perform consistently or whatever, or in relation to each other in gel, but that's just a test medium. In real life, what they're going to do is part of it too. So what Dana was saying about what the police might use, well, police have different constraints than us. I'm sure for legal reasons, it's
absolutely
the default to I'm using what the police use, but you can't just always assume that that's perfect for what we're doing. And then
sometimes there's a departmental cost issue and stuff too. I mean, when we're talking what the police use
and all that, but if you're talking Alaska, then sure, you might have a bad guy, but I don't know what the crime rate is in Alaska. I think you might have just as much or even more of a potential of needing to deal with a grizzly bear or something, or a crazy seal or whatever weird thing. Wolverine.
I thought I said some pretty conditional words like in town and might be worth your consideration. I didn't say it was the go-to thing.
I don't care. I didn't say that you were wrong. I just said as an alternative to what you said. Come on, I'm not allowed to use what you said as a reference. That you get offended? I'm just saying it. So nobody
the other thing
anyway.
that I guess I just have a good difficulty is, if somebody wants to do some testing on their own, I got no problem with that. But unless you're going to do hundreds of repetitions, you don't have enough of a sampling size to get any sort of significance from your testing, other than you verified it to yourself and to your own satisfaction that something is either good enough, questionable, or not good enough.
That's like saying that you can't take your car out and time it on a drag strip to get performance because that's not driving it in traffic. I mean,
it's like saying if you take your car to the drag strip and you race it once, you have one data point. You cannot say all makes and models of that year will perform in the exact same way.
No. Okay. I'm saying, though, that very few people are going to go to all the trouble of buying ballistic gel and shoot a bullet through it once and then go, all right, I'm done. I figured out ballistics. They're going to buy that stuff, and then they're either going to shoot, well, they're probably going to shoot the same thing through it a couple of times, like you say, just to get an average. But then they're going to shoot some other brand of ammo and some other brand of ammo. And then each subsequent brand of ammo they think about, they're going to shoot, and they're going to be creating a set of data based on that consistent data set, right? That piece of gel that they own. And whether or not that has anything to do with what the police use or what their numbers are in their ballistic gel, because it's a consistent block of gel that you're shooting either in your backyard or at whatever place you shoot it at, that's going to be fairly consistent. And then no matter what those numbers are in relation to other people's numbers, you know what I'm saying? You can use your own data to figure out, okay, I like this ammo, or this ammo, acts significantly different in the gel. I'm not going to use it. I don't know. I don't know how many people are actually going to the trouble of buying gel, though. I think that there's definitely people who are buying the gel and doing videos and stuff, which are adding to the knowledge base out there, but probably a lot fewer people actually doing it themselves.
Right. And, to use, unfortunately, a guy who's no longer doing it, but that, TN Outdoors 9, he had a number of control factors that he used in his testing, which made it very applicable in regards to monitoring the temperature of the brick, that it stays within the FBI protocol, doing penetration tests, things, aspects like that, which are not sexy, not fun necessarily, but it's all making sure that when you go to test brand X versus brand Y versus brand Z, that you're testing it against very, very similar conditions.
Yeah, and I don't think he went out of his way necessarily. I think he just went out of his way to record all those, but he lived in Tennessee where it was fairly consistent, and he could, he didn't have to create the environment. He just recorded the environment each time. It happened to be really consistent for him.
There are temperature specifications for that ballistic gel. They're not, 70 degrees.
I know, but I'm just saying he didn't live in a place that, one day it was 100 and the next day it was 50 and the next day it was 70. He lived in a pretty consistent environment, so he didn't really have to do a lot to create the environment. He lived in a consistent environment. He was able to, he just went to the trouble of recording it all. So JP is saying he tests his bullets for on live deer for his data. That's another thing. A lot of people, especially with the pigs, with basically unlimited number of pigs that are out there. I've known people that'll go out and try different rounds. They will do it in their deer, but you only get one deer out here, and our deers are little. But when you've got access to pigs, like in Texas or other states where they got a bunch of them wild pigs running around, I know people that'll, hunt with various rounds, take a couple of guns out or swap calibers, and help you use that kind of data, which is definitely completely inconsistent, much more real world. And I don't know if I don't pay attention to that kind of stuff on the YouTube, but it's possible that people are out there compiling some of that info. I'm sure they are with like 300 blackouts and stuff that are, becoming popular recently.
But the basic question is, ball ammo for carry, good idea, bad idea?
I'm going to say hollow points. I hate to say it's a bad idea. I'm just going to say hollow point is probably a better idea. But honestly, if you had to choose, better to have ball ammo than no ammo, right?
Yeah, I guess the best answer I could come up with is being caliber dependent. Hollow points are generally the better way to go.
Now I will say take one of the things that Tony said here, something about I can't scroll. What are you saying here? He says, well, 9mm ball does not overpenetrate. I'd say it's more like 9mm ammo can't overpenetrate. But that just has to do with the physical characteristics of it. Doesn't have enough power.
Z, are you back? I guess not.
All right, well, I guess that'll take us into the next segment. So we've solved that one for everybody. We all agree on it. So that means that's the law of the land. You're going to carry hollow point ammo from now on. Wrap it up, Buttercup. Whenever Z gets back, we'll talk about a movie. So why don't we talk about some history? So this isn't really history, but this blew me away. I'm hoping it'll show up good on screen capture here. Is there a way for me to full screen Instagram? I hope. I don't know if there is, but I don't know. This thing is incredible. Did you see this on the Marines?
Battles aren't won solely on the field.
This is on the Marines' Instagram.
Battles are won within, over enemies of fear, enemies of doubt. In that place where promises are kept. Promises to oneself. Promises to one's community. Promises to one's country. In the heart of every Marine, you'll find a promise. A promise forever kept. A promise of battles won. Battles aren't won solely on the field. That's a common misconception. Battles are won within, over enemies of fear, enemies of doubt. In that place where promises are kept. Promises to oneself. Promises to one's community. Promises to one's country. In the heart of every Marine, you'll find a promise. A promise forever kept. A promise of battles won.
Now, I don't know if I hope that came through as awesome as it is, but I'm going to encourage
Marines make the best fucking commercials.
Dude, if that doesn't, I mean, that is neat. And I don't know if it came through or whatever, but dropping the link. I encourage you to take a look at it. And if you're of recruiting age, maybe be careful because that's excellent, excellent.
Dude, I mean, okay, so think about it. The last one, or one of the last ones that was super epic was the guy that literally climbs the cliff face by himself, grabs the saber, and slays the freaking dragon, right? Let alone the one, I mean, I'm sorry. Marines make fantastic freaking commercials.
Yep.
They are very inspiring, and I saw this one earlier today, and I'm really glad that you're talking about it because, yeah, this... it was totally amazing. Totally, absolutely, 100%, just amazing.
Yeah, I don't know where they came up with that. If that's seriously,
and if it kind of don't hit you in the feels, man.
Oh, then you got something wrong with your feels, man.
That's kind of what I was wondering because I don't know how. Yeah, again, feels for reals.
So, like at the end, it kind of makes it seem like that's all one big statue, and I'm not sure if it is or not. But wow, that was really cool. It's really neat imagery. I don't know how they came up with that, but yeah, kudos. That was awesome. So I just saw that on there,
and you can recognize some of the people specifically. It seemed like, of course, obviously the Iwo Jima stuff, but if you look close enough, I'm sure some of those are potentially well-known Marines. Even some. I'm not going to say all or anything like that, but. Whether it was, it's like the history of the Marines, like when they were boarding the ships and repelling borders at the very beginning, like that's where the Marines come from. That's where the leathernecks come from to keep from getting beheaded by the pirates of the Ivory Coast and stuff like that. I mean, it's awesome.
All right, with that, we'll go into the gun of the day, or I mean the movie of the day.
What we got today?
Zulu. Is it just Zulu? Shaka Zulu's a different one, right?
Well, Shaka Zulu's different. Zulu was the one that came first. This is one of those ones where you wonder if colonialism was a good thing. You genuinely have to kind of question that if you're going to watch this movie.
So it's basically the British when they're still in the weird days of like bolt actions and red suits and whatnot, and then
when they were colonizing the world, yes,
kicking the crap out of everybody, and the Zulus, tribe in Africa or whatever, just like a war, really. They're battling the whole time.
Weren't having it. They weren't having it.
So it's one of those epic ones, right? It was before my time, I think, from the '60s or something. But it's one of those that they big budget type of movies.
Michael Caine, yeah, epic.
An adventure, or wait, what do they call those? An adventure, because it's like the scenery and the settings and everything, the costumes and all that. They went all out, big budget, and it's good plot and everything too, but visually very interesting movie. A lot of money in it.
Definitely. And you see some of the so you're going to see some of the technological advances at the time of the British, right? Whether it's formations or firepower against the
spears,
will and ferocity in numbers of the Zulu or Zulu Maasai. I'm not sure if they were the same at that time or not. I would hate to misrepresent it. But it was one of those things where we don't lose, we win against, we have been warriors for thousands of years. Like, that was the thing about the Zulu, right?
Yep.
It's like literally warring tribes for thousands of years. Like, it's part of their genetic makeup. Now, I'm not saying that the British weren't or anything like that, because of course, it's part of their history too. But the Zulu were basically in a state of warring with other tribes for that whole time.
Just a lot different with the spears and the manpower as opposed to technology and guns and what.
Yep.
So yeah, I think I'm going to give it 1 thumbs up because I haven't seen it in a while, but I might be wrong and should have given it 2, but I just haven't seen it, so I'm going to give it 1 for sure.
Well, and if I remember right, I don't know that they necessarily paint the British in such a positive light, or should I say that they don't necessarily paint the Zulu as the bad guys. I think they kind of do, but they show some things where the British are seemingly more cruel in the movie than the Zulu are. And when you figure out that the Zulu are just defending themselves and their land, that actually and I hope I'm not offending any of our British viewers out there, they were the bad guys technically.
Well,
even though the movie,
Raphael's saying that he's not seen the movie, but he's interested in watching it once he watched this review. I just linked the review over on the YouTube side also. I guess it's a channel on YouTube that called History Buffs.
Is it the history guy? Yeah.
Where they take a look at movies and their accuracy.
And they see how accurate it is, yeah.
So so that's I'd be interesting to watch that probably first, right? Now that there's that resource, and then watch the movie, because if I don't know, maybe unless you like to experience the movie first without a bunch of.
I might do that and then do the review of it.
Yeah.
Potentially, because then you would know what they're talking about after you've experienced it, as opposed to potentially
waiting for stuff.
Anything.
Yeah, screwing it with it. So yeah, depending on how you like.
And Enrique is right out there. Make sure you watch on a widescreen, or watch the widescreen version of it, as opposed to whatever the other one is, the box, or I mean not the box. What is the other one? Because it's widescreen, and what's the other one that they used to put on everything, where it's formatted to fit your TV, which is not the one to watch.
Yeah, I don't know what they call it. They not had a number or something, but
yeah, because Enrique is right. Definitely watch it on a widescreen. That's how, because they don't do the pan and scan. Same with Lawrence of Arabia. Like, don't watch that one on anything but widescreen because you're gonna miss like 2/3 of the movie because it's all happening on the sides that they've panned and scanned. Yeah. Letterbox is the good stuff. Letterbox and widescreen are about the same thing. Let's see. Oh, okay. So Diecast are saying Zulu Dawn is the one where they get their asses kicked. Maybe because that was the thing. I had watched. I've definitely watched Zulu. Thought Zulu Dawn and Shaka Zulu as well. And I found them all to be because I always liked history, so they were definitely interesting enough to me to watch with enthusiasm and stuff.
I think I saw this one for the first time on like Saturday afternoon TV, so I never got to experience it giant or anything, and I never saw it in a movie theater or anything like that. So this would probably be one of those things if you've got a local movie theater that shows off movies or whatever to jump on if they show it.
Yes, absolutely.
We've got one in town here.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with you on that.
They'll play like old movies just for the sake of being able to see them big.
That's pretty cool, man. I wish we had stuff like that around here. That'd be awesome.
It helps to have a university, you know, because then they get like an audience of kids that, you know, think it's cool or hip or whatever, probably.
Well, and you can get enough tickets to sell the movie, so to speak, because I know you kind of can do that. You know, it's like if you can sell enough pre-sale tickets or whatever, there's a chance to be able to get the movie if it's a movie that's willing to come here, so to speak, you know, for the cost or whatever. So it's one of those things.
So I think I've heard that before too, that it's not unrealistic. It wasn't slanted one way or the other with some kind of agenda, which doesn't necessarily
is cool.
Watch, right? Because sometimes you gotta go, oh wow, people were dicks back then.
Yeah, yeah, you know, and that's the thing that people these days kind of forget. You know, history is filled with violence and debauchery and moral ambiguity, and then also love and hope. You know what I mean? Like, there's all of that, and sometimes it just doesn't come in equal portions, man. You know. They forget sometimes these days how tough stuff was back in the day, so to speak.
Well, I think we've pretty much hit all the stuff we were going to hit today. Unless somebody's got a healthy tip we could throw out there. I was keep meaning to go in here, and I just never seem to find the time to jump in and fill up the healthy tips for the next couple of weeks here. But it's probably a good time to mention again that we have a Patreon account where we have a bunch of people who are supporting the show, and I'll screen share here. Patreon is it's like a social media platform. It allows people to participate or contribute to shows like this one that happen on a regular basis. So we appreciate everybody that's supporting the show. We're up to $56 a month. That's allowing us to pay for the hosting of the podcast, and we're working towards having you know, more resources for the show. We have a $1 level, which we say thank you for being a member. At the $3 level, you're in the running for one of our patches each month. We'll do a random patch of the month for those people. And then at the $20 level, you'll get a patch from the patch panel each month. And if we look over at our posts over on Patreon, we should have a picture of the patch panel here. Actually, that's the one for the Daily Gun Show. We have a separate one for the show itself. It's got some of the logos from some of the people on gun channels, as well as ours. Actually, that's one from, yeah, that is ours. So anybody that wants to help the show, we don't have any sponsors. We're not beholden to anyone except our audience, and we do appreciate everybody that participates over there. And I'll take a link there if I can get it.
Did we give our shout outs for the shows today, like Andalusia Armory, and then we got Hit or Miss coming up later, and maybe a little Big Gunner, as well as tomorrow is a Jimmy James Day, right? On the early watch?
That's right. Yep. So yeah, we talked a little bit. We had Night Strike on earlier, so he'll be doing his show with Smeggy later on this evening, Hit or Miss. We also have Rick from Illinois. Well, at the moment in Illinois, it sounds like he's moving. He does his Big Gunner show, and then the Andalusia Army just ended about a half an hour ago, but we did talk about that at the beginning of the show. And yeah, cool. Tomorrow will be Jimmy James with the early watch. Actually, the daytimes of gun channels have been a lot more populated, or a lot more activity than in the evenings lately. So thanks to Jimmy James for that, and him and Tony and Night Strike and Raphael actually is jumping on quite a bit, and the others.
They got a pretty interesting dynamic. I've listened a couple of shows over the past couple of weeks, and not only do they crack me up, but they got a kind of a different thing going, which is pretty cool in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. I leave it running just like the radio or something, and it's much more interesting to listen to just regular conversation and than to listen to whatever the news is trying to tell me, or whatever the talk shows are trying to tell me.
And I'm sorry, and I know we can't steal it, G, but I love Guess That Gun. I really, really do.
Yeah, he does it a better way than we do it.
It's fun.
Yeah. It has more time, so different audience, and yeah, it makes it a little easier. They kind of give some clues, and then the more clues, eventually someone will get it. But it's always fun to hear somebody catch it off of some of the early clues. All right, so I think with that, we can wrap up episode 277. Oh, no, we have a gun of the day. We didn't do the gun of the day, so I'll jump over to that. And this week, we're talking about AK-47 stuff, and we're taking a look at some of our videos. Let's see, when is this video from? This video was made back in 2011, and this one has to do with the 922R, the requirements for the configuration of a semi-automatic firearm. That there's a rule. 922R is a set of rules that together require that a semi-automatic firearm be configured in a way that it could be importable, which means it needs.
Does the R stand for ridiculous?
It should, because it's not just. I mean, there is Chapter 18, Title 18, Chapter 44, subsection 922R of the United States Code. Does exist, but what it does is it references the 1968 Gun Control Act and this section 1789. Excuse me, it's defined by those, it's required by those two, but then the 922R itself references 18925, and then that references 5845. So by itself, you don't get the entirety of it. You have to then reference these others, and because of that, it makes it confusing as can be. So it's basically 922R is describing that set of 5 conditions that impose a regulation of sorts on semi-automatic rifles, and that semi-automatic rifles, because they can be imported as opposed to pistols or something else like a full auto, and then semi-auto because of some other reference. But basically what we're talking about is, in general, the way it's summarized is that a certain amount of the parts need to be made in the USA. And anyway, I put together this 15-minute video that is my attempt at offering the dissection of it, where it's required, what parts of law suggest that it's required, and then what parts of the law define it or give it its parameters. And then, of course, it's up to all of us to decide based on actual enforcement and, its applicability, like how, since it's never enforced, is it something that we have to, if it's something that you're going to deal with, is up to your interpretation of it, I suppose, in a way. And getting into more minutia of it, when you start talking about the different firearms, every firearm has a different accumulation of parts, so each one is going to have its own definition or its own number of parts that need to be made in the USA. So if we look at this chart, an AK-47 isn't just an AK-47. A stamped and a milled are different because of the front trunnion. A trunnion is one of the parts that they consider of a gun, and they don't exist on a milled, for example. Different things like that can be different. On a Sega rifle, you have a sear that you don't have on other rifles. when you start talking about variations like the Galil and the VZ58, again, built differently. So they have different parts, specifically the trunnion. Then you get into things like an SKS, obviously a different gun, or a FAL or an Uzi. And again, they're built differently. So they have different gun or different components. And that means they have different parts count. So when you extrapolate that over to the 922R, you're going to deal with different numbers of parts that need to be made in the US. So fairly confusing. I think that's what this chart is showing. Once you start looking at the various guns and what components they actually have, as far as 922R, it's like 6 parts that you deal with on a stamped receiver, where there's only 5 parts you'll ever have to deal with on a milled receiver, where there might be 6 or 7 depending on which Sega you're talking about.
Well, I got to admit, that was one thing that I had to start. Well, I don't know if I had to pay attention to, but I tried to a little bit when I ended up purchasing my first AK. And there were things that I wanted to change. So I think it also is going to depend on who either the importer or assembler is, correct? Because they may put in the American trigger, but then another one may not. So it would definitely, or do they try and like replace the same parts? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't think there's any effort at looking at what their peers are doing and doing something similar. It's more of a situation that there are only so many parts that can be swapped, which ones are practical and affordable, and which ones are appealing to the end customer. That's more of the thing. And once you get into all of those, there's just not a lot of wiggle room. Like,
okay,
you could change out a receiver, but is it practical, or cost wise, or even appealing to the customer to do all that work? It would make the gun cost so much more. It wouldn't offer anything better to the customer. So, that is, it's not that there's any, like they sat together and said, hey, let's not do this. It's just that it doesn't make any sense. Nobody did it.
Well, for example, since I got an Arsenal or whatever, before I bought my first waffle mag, I had to count them up to make sure that those 3 parts weren't going to, make me a criminal. And I believe that the way Arsenal assembles their rifles, that it allowed for those 3 parts.
Yep. Since there's 3 parts of a magazine, according to the 922R definition, there's 3 parts of the magazine count: the bottom plate, the follower, and the body. So if you were to buy a foreign magazine, that's basically adding 3 foreign parts to your gun every time you insert it. So then, yeah, if they didn't switch out 3 internal trigger pieces, and then potentially a stock and a grip and a handguard, which they probably did, then every time you inserted a foreign mag, you'd be out of compliance. There's definitely some guns that are sold with a US mag intentionally because they didn't bother to switch out some of the other parts. That way it looks more, I guess, realistic. And then you get the potential of, once you take out that mag and insert a foreign mag, did it take it out of compliance? Or because the end user now owns it, is that an issue? And that's something I don't talk about in this video specifically, mainly because that's so much open to interpretation and personal interpretation, I guess. There's, again, there's the laws that exist, and there's the way that they're written, which is very difficult to understand. There's no uniform, like, practice of enforcement. So that's
what I was going to go to. G, have you ever, like, in your travels, and I'm not saying on the internet or something like that, I'm saying literally in all your years of being an AK guy and going to ranges and or gun shops, have you ever found somebody that had been either hassled or inspected for compliance at any point?
No. And I mean, maybe with a manufacturer it might be a thing, but at an individual level, I've never heard of something like that. And I don't know if the manufacturers had ever actually been pegged or talked about or even inquired about it by any kind of regulatory agency, as much as they just figure, you got to comply with all laws. This is a law. Let's just comply with it. And then it's never an issue. So,
and technically, if it was enforcement, this would be an ATF specific, correct? It would not necessarily be your local or state law enforcement at all for compliance. It should be technically an ATF enforcement issue. Wouldn't you not think so?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Maybe FBI, I guess. Well, because I'm just wondering who is going to be the one that goes, "Oh, I'm going to need you to pop that dust cover, son." I need to make sure that that's not a Bulgarian trigger spring right there, partner.
I don't know. So then, if you're talking what's under the realm of the ATF versus what's under the realm of local law enforcement, I don't know if there is a line in the sand. So, for example, if you go to the extreme and you pick up an M16, a full auto gun, and you're shooting that in front of a local law enforcement, do they have the right to inspect an NFA item? No.
I didn't think so.
But does the local law enforcement have the right to say put down that machine gun? Because I don't know if it's in compliance or not. I mean, yeah, what the fuck?
I think they do, yeah.
Law enforcement can tell you to put down a freaking gun, and if they want to look at it, what are you going to do? So if they decided to enforce 922R, I don't know. Maybe if some crazy sheriff out there decided I'm going to start educating my officers to do this, and they all agreed, and then they went out to the ranges and started to check compliance. I don't know. And then what? Once they checked your gun, do they put some kind of stamp on it that it's been checked and it's in compliance? Because we're talking about parts that can be swapped
with a freaking date on it. I bet, dude. Like, think about it. It would be like a stamp with the date on it, like checked on this date, and we might check it again just in case you change it after we leave.
Well, that's the thing. What if you're at a line with 30 bays, and you're on the right, and they're coming through, and they start on the right, or they start on the left of the mirror, and then they check your gun, and then you reach into your bag and you pull out a Magpul pistol grip and you put that on. That takes your gun into a different state of compliance potentially. So what if you reach into your bag and put a standard mag into it? I mean, that's crazy. So I don't know where the...
Yeah, that gets pretty cuckoo, don't it?
Now, here's the other thing that 922R brings up that I don't talk about in this particular video, but I think it's interesting since we're just kind of ripping on it. 922R suggests that a firearm is an accumulation of these parts, and the number of these parts that are of a certain origin can determine whether or not a gun is built legally in or out of compliance. So a magazine is part of three of the whatever 16 parts you need on an AK, or 3 of the 20 parts that are regulated by 922R on an AK-47 and a stamped receiver. So without a magazine installed, is it not a gun anymore? At least, I mean, there's a serial on it.
Man, wow. I would say
accumulation of most
yes.
But it can't fire, can't shoot, can't operate. You could put a bullet in it, but it's not a gun, according to 922R.
Really? Okay, I see what you're reaching on there. I see that. But like technically
Russian gun. You could have a gun that's completely Russian, and every single part of it was Russian. And as long as it's not illegal for you to possess it, you put it down on your kitchen table and you take, there's no magazine in it, but every other piece of that gun is straight from Russia. And now you insert a Russian mag, it's gone from a pile of parts that don't matter to a pile of parts that become a firearm now that you've assembled it into a firearm. And now it's out of 922R compliance. So it wasn't out of 922R compliance when the magazine was out because it didn't have the 20 parts that make it a gun. So, I mean, there must be some kind of lawyer magic that says just because these parts exist, they're still a gun because of the receiver, or, I don't know.
And that's what I would assume. No, I say assume because if you drop the mag out of your Glock, it's still a gun, right? Just because you drop the mag out of your Glock doesn't make it not a gun. You could, like you said, you could still technically drop a round in there and it would still be a firearm. So yeah, and that also goes to the ridiculousness. That is probably what the R stands for, because it was a vindictive stopgap, is what it was originally, correct? It was put in place to hamper the importation of foreign-made firearms, probably at the behest of domestic producers.
No, I wouldn't.
Well, I bet you they asked. I would think, wouldn't you?
No, I would think that they had influence, and I don't know if they were asked or if they offered their opinion, but I think that the 1968 Gun Control Act, which created the importation restrictions that we're talking about here,
with the sporting use and all that crap.
Right, the sporting use, that it was more for pistols, Saturday Night Specials, than it was for rifles. Now, there was some aspect of it or component to it that I'm sure domestic manufacturers of hunting rifles and whatnot, just recreational rifles, didn't really like the idea that, massive loads of foreign World War II surplus was coming over at, $1 a rifle, made by military spending or whatever, war spending, so there was no manufacturer cost. All this stuff was just coming over.
Literally, there's no way to compete with it. Literally, it would be impossible.
So I'm sure they didn't dig it, but on the other hand, I don't think that they started from scratch and said, "Hey, let's screw with our customers by making sure they can't buy these guns." And then if Saturday Night Specials get involved, who cares? I think that it was Saturday Night Specials, and then they said, "Okay, if we're going to stop importation, do we stop importation of everything?" And then maybe when they said, "Look, we're talking about rifles, let's get some input," maybe that's when your Ruger and your Remington and your Winchesters might have had something to say about it, but. That's all conjecture. I've never actually done the research myself to find out how much influence the domestic manufacturers had in that. It's always just been speculation. I mean, it definitely.
And I have a question. If you could, oh, you go finish. My bad.
No, I'm just saying it just helps them out, but that doesn't mean that they're guilty of it. Just because they benefited from it doesn't mean they instigated it.
So a 922R literally only affects rifles that are imported. Correct? Rifles that are imported as rifles, correct?
Wait.
Now, the reason I guess I'm asking that is 922R, yes. The reason I'm asking that is because I'm about to slide in the Bulgarian pistol or what would be, is there a Russian version of the AK pistol that's specific?
No, there's
Russian?
no Sega pistols. No, there's no Sega or Vepr pistols being imported.
All right. So I guess what I would be talking about would be like a SAM 7 or a SAM 6 or something like that. The Bulgarian Krink-ish or whatever. Like, since it wouldn't happen to need any American parts because it is a pistol, it can be imported exactly as it comes from the factory, right? So I'm not saying that's a loophole.
No,
on any level.
The Gun Control Act involves it deals with all importations. So it's a pistol that takes it out of the realm of rifle. So, but it still has the deal with pistol. Now, pistols were infringed on small, lightweight, inexpensive ones. So when you're talking AK pistol, you're talking large, heavy, with a massive caliber round. So everything that was restricted on pistols is not even an issue with an AK pistol. So they didn't know that. They probably, if they would have thought about AK pistols, which didn't exist then, they would have put parameters on both sides. They would have said,
okay,
oh,
yes,
if it's too big, then you start losing points also, and they would have killed it before it even was an issue. But they were stupid, and they don't know, and they don't care, and they don't know the topic they're regulating. So they just did it open-ended because they were only myopically looking at Saturday Night Specials. But so it's technically, you're right that it's coming through without the restrictions of 922R, but it still has restrictions, just happens to not touch any of those restrictions.
And I want to extrapolate that just a teeny bit further, and this is where it's going to blow up, of course. So you take that same Arsenal pistol that we were just talking about, and then you try to SBR it. Yes, you may be able to SBR it with your appropriate tax stamp, but then it will no longer be in 922R compliance, and you would have to change the requisite number of components, correct?
Not correct. 922R
really
applies to rifles and pistols. It doesn't apply to NFA items. So,
so literally you could import it as such and then pay for the tax stamp to SBR it then, and it would no longer be required to be in 922R compliance because it's still because it was imported as a pistol?
No, it has nothing to do with its importation status. Once you turn it into an NFA item, it's no longer a rifle or a pistol. It's an NFA item. It's
a
rifle or something. So now it's not. It's beyond the realm of 922R. 922R doesn't apply to military rifles. It doesn't apply to machine guns. It doesn't apply to your SBR when you convert it to an SBR.
Oh.
So since we're talking about it, and I don't remember, it's been, I guess, 6 years since I made this video. I'm going to just hit play here and we'll just watch a bit of it if that's okay with everybody.
Cool.
Talking about building an AK-47 or modifying an AK-47 or an FAL or an Uzi. It applies to most semi-automatic military-style rifles, but it can be a pretty confusing subject. So we're going to try to shed some light on it as well as answer some questions that come up from our websites and our videos. Specifically, 922R is Title 18, Chapter 44, subsection 922, paragraph R of the United States Code. In other words, it's a federal law. It was created by the 1968 Gun Control Act and requires the 1968 Gun Control Act for its definition. It references another portion of U.S. code, which references an IRS code, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. But aside from all this, it also requires another piece of code for its definition, and that's Title 27, and we'll talk about that as well. So you can see that it's a little bit confusing. Let's try to look at it from another angle. We'll go through a bit of a timeline here, starting with the National Firearms Act of 1934, the first piece of firearms legislation in the U.S. since the Second Amendment. Is important because it created a definition of firearms. Before 1934, of course, all firearms were simply firearms. But this created a bit of a slippery slope, and in 1968, 34 years later, they created the Gun Control Act, or the Gun Control Act created some legislation and added a sporting purpose test, which stopped the importation of military-style long arms. Of course, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The Gun Control Act created Title 18, 922R of the U.S. Code, which regulates the domestic assembly of long arms that were banned from that importation of non-sporting firearms. By definition, though, the 922R does not apply to pistols. The 68 Gun Control Act also created Title 27, which prohibited domestic assembly of those non-importable weapons and gave us the count, specifically the parts and number of parts that make up a non-sporting firearm. And again, we'll talk about all these in more detail, but you can see that we started with the 1934 NFA, which led to the 68 Gun Control Act, which created the legislation that is now 922R. I'll take a moment to talk about sporting purposes, and if you take anything away from this discussion, I hope this is it. Hopefully we'll find a champion to go after this cause, because all the slippery slopes that are in firearms legislation, this is, in my opinion, the slipperiest. So sporting purposes, while the letter of the law has not changed, the politics of its interpretation has and still does. And we'll talk a bit more about that as we go along here. So the 1968 Gun Control Act is required for 922R. So let's take a little bit closer look at that 1968 Gun Control Act. The wording of the act requires that a firearm must be generally recognized as particularly suitable for or readily adaptable to sporting purposes. Unfortunately, sporting purposes is interpreted by the ATF. And sporting purposes as of October 2011 includes only hunting and organized competitive target shooting. It does not include plinking or private target shooting or practical shooting sports such as three-gun or rifle, steel, and that kind of thing. The ATF also does not allow importation for collecting or other historical interests. And again, hopefully someone will take something away from this, and in addition to the 922R. So looking at the actual section 922R, it's definitely confusing because it relies on and it's required by other portions of the code. But simply put, it requires that all non-sporting firearms be compliant. So let's take a look at the actual wording of the law. It shall be unlawful for any person to assemble from imported parts any semi-automatic rifle or any shotgun which is identical to any rifle or shotgun prohibited from importation under section 925 of this chapter as not being particularly suitable for or readily adaptable to sporting purposes. And then it goes on to offer a couple of exceptions for military and law enforcement. So again, we see sporting purposes weaving its way in here, and it tells us that it's referring to section 925. So let's take a look at this other section of code that 922R refers to. It basically says the firearm needs to be of a type that does not fall within the definition of a firearm as defined in section 5845 of the IRS code, and is generally recognized as particularly suitable for or readily adaptable to sporting purposes. And it goes on to exclude military and other firearms. So again, we're looking at it can't fall within the definition of this IRS code, and it has to be generally recognized as particularly suitable for sporting purposes, weaving its way through here again. So next, let's take a look at this IRS code that this other code refers to. And this is basically the definition of a Title II or NFA firearm. So if we weave our way back through the definitions here, the IRS code of NFA items, it can't be part of those. It has to be readily adaptable to sporting purposes according to 18925. Next, let's talk about Title 27, which again defines the 922R. This defines the amount of parts used when assembling a semi-automatic rifle or a shotgun. We're talking here about compliance parts. We're not talking about any of the evil features such as bayonet lugs or barrel shrouds or pre-ban or post-ban or any of the assault weapons ban stuff. We're simply talking about 922 compliance parts. I know that can be pretty confusing when you're trying to make sense of all the firearms jargon that's out there. So looking at section 178, we see that it's pretty long. So we're going to separate this top half from the list here, and we'll look at the top half first. And it tells us that no person shall assemble a semi-automatic rifle or any shotgun using more than 10 imported parts listed in paragraph C. That's that list that we'll take a look at in a moment. If the assembled firearm is prohibited from importation under section 925, which we just looked at, which refers to the IRS page, and not being particularly suitable or readily adaptable to sporting purposes. So again, we see sporting purposes weaving its way through. So now we have a couple of exceptions again for military and law enforcement. I just want to take a brief moment as an aside to mention when we say military and law enforcement, of course, we don't mean any individuals. It's any department or agency of the United States or any state or department or agency or subdivision thereof. So we're talking about agencies here. We're not talking about individuals. So now we'll take a look at the list of parts that are included in 178. We're looking at a list of 20 parts that are in the U.S. Code as components of a firearm. And the ATF determines which components apply to each firearm. And we get that in the way of ATF letters like these. However, these are pretty difficult to make way, so we're going to just jump to a quick chart here. Now we can see that the various firearms, such as the FAL or the Uzi or the SKS or the AK-47s, all have different parts, so they all are going to apply to different portions here, and they're all going to have their own number of parts counts. So let's make it a little simpler by removing all the others and just look at the AK-47s. When we look at just this subset, we see that none of them have a barrel extension, none of them have an operating rod, none of them have a trigger housing. So let's remove those three items to give us a little more room to work with, and we'll see that most of the AKs have either 16 or 15 countable parts. Since we know that 10 of those parts can be foreign parts, if we just do some quick math, we know that the U.S. parts required are either going to be 5 or 6. Now, why should you care about 922?
We don't have to do the whole video there, but yeah, that was my attempt 7 years ago, I guess now, 6 years ago, to come up with a definition of it. Obviously, I can go back and try to do that again sometime. And we now have a champion. Somebody is pushing through the lawful sporting or the lawful use bill, which will change all those sporting uses to lawful use, and that'll change the whole paradigm.
Has that bill actually been written and introduced yet, or no?
Well, if we go to every
Because
second,
I haven't
out on the thing, but the last I saw it was going through House committee, so it needs to go to the whole House, and then of course once it's through the whole House, it'll have to go through the Senate. I don't know if it goes through a committee first or just the whole Senate, and then once it goes through the president, we hope he would sign it. But at this point, it's a bill, so we can't ask for, well, we can ask for more than that, but at least we've got it as a bill. It's not like it's a theoretical, it would be nice. It's a bill, and it's something that we can champion. Unfortunately, it's not as sexy as the Hearing Protection Act. We don't have manufacturers necessarily all on board like we do with suppressor manufacturers coming up with the Hearing American Suppressor Association, and keeping that effort going. It'd be more of individuals, I think, type of effort if we can keep that going.
Well, and see, I didn't realize that it had been introduced, because now I need to contact my representatives to make sure that they are aware of how I feel about that. I wasn't sure that had come up yet, so I'll definitely try and do what I can. Because yeah, lawful use has a totally different connotation or slightly less open to interpretation than sporting.
Yeah, it'd definitely be more difficult for them to persecute anybody for just having it lawfully. So that's the way it really needs to be. The laws don't need to be there at all, but a good way to nullify the laws basically would be to switch all those sportings to lawful. Then you could, doesn't matter if the gun looks too scary for somebody, you can build it back up to however you want. And I mean, that would just, it's not going to change anything. The guns are already being built cosmetically, technically the same. They're just the source of the parts is the only real difference. The parts are exactly the same.
What a world it would be if we got rid of those three, the 86, the 68, and the 34. All of a sudden, you quite possibly could get a real AK-47.
Not quite yet, because the receivers would still have that third pin, the hole for the third pin. You can't have the receivers with that hole, so they'd still have to be chopped into parts kit, but we'd have a lot better
Wait a minute. If we got rid of the 68, the 86, and the NFA, we would still have another hurdle?
No. I'm sorry. I thought you said just get rid of the lawful use part, or get rid of this.
Oh, no. I'm saying what a world it would be if we didn't have any of the three.
Yeah, ammo would be a lot more fun.
Oh, heck yeah.
All right, so we got off a little bit of a side tangent there. Hopefully it was interesting. We just kept a lot of the viewers there, so thanks for watching. I think, though, that'll end episode 277. I'm pretty sure Hit or Miss is starting now, so if you want to continue watching something live, head over to Gun Channels, and they'll have a link to it on the main page there. Otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow with episode 278. We're going to talk about what holsters and positions y'all prefer for concealed carry. We'll be talking about MacGyver versus James Bond for the entertainment segment.
Oh my God, it's a death match. That's awesome.
And then our tactical quiz. Did you guys have a good tactical quiz last week?
We did not have a tactical quiz last. We had a tactical pop quiz, but not a regular tactical quiz. We didn't want to sully its honor with anything less than perfection.
Well, even though I left notes and everything in there, I guess we'll do that last week's one this week. So look forward to that. Otherwise, we have all of our daily stuff that we hit every day, and
we got a quote in there.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to run it down.
Right on. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you again to all of our listeners and people participating. If you do have the opportunity, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions, send them over to dailygunshow@gmail.com. We definitely want to see that hashtag Daily Gun Show get spread around the internets. So if you get a chance, please post up on that. But our quote of the day that we're going to end on is by Antonio Maloney. The problem is not the availability of guns. It's the availability of morons. And on that note, everybody have a great evening. Be safe out there, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Aloha.
The guys and gals of GunWebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thanks for watching GunWebsites.com.